What a season it's been. I mean, can we all just take a step back and just give thanks to the racing gods for this incredible season of NASCAR finishes? How's it going, everyone? My name is Eric and welcome back to Out of the Groove. I just got done watching the first Data 500 at Martinsville Speedway, another all-time classic finish. It's the second one we've had just in these playoffs alone. I can think of at least 4 races this year, just in the second half of the season, that I would possibly put on my top 10 greatest NASCAR finishes of all time list. The racing this year has been pretty good, but the finishes especially, we've had so many great ones. And Martinsville here today was no different. We'll get to that in a moment, but first I want to talk a little bit about the overall race. Not a whole lot happened, at least not a lot that had playoff implications happened until the end, but we'll talk a little bit about everything. So before the race even started, it's worth mentioning that several drivers, including Martin Truex Jr., a playoff driver, failed post-qualifying inspection, so they had to start this race from the rear. Anyway, stage 1 went off without too many issues. Had a couple lazy spins here and there. Jimmy Johnson went around at one point. Martin Truex Jr. slowly marched his way towards the front. Denny Hamlin won the stage. We had Joey Logano and Kyle Busch both there in the top 3. By the end of stage 1, Truex had worked his way all the way up to 7th. So we were pretty quickly kind of establishing our top 4 or 5 contenders for this race. Stage 2 went completely green. Joey Logano led us to the restart after winning the race off pit road. He basically led the entire stage and won stage number 2. But it got exciting towards the end. It was a close finish. Hamlin and Kyle Busch were still right there behind him. Stage 3 then began and Joey Logano continued to lead for a while until around lap 340, Martin Truex Jr. worked his way through the top 5, got to 2nd place, and was starting to reel in the leader. Remember, this is a 500 lap race, and it wasn't until lap 360 that Martin Truex Jr. finally took the race lead. And the NBC broadcast continued to remind the audience that Martin Truex Jr. has never won a cup race at a short track, so I guess this was a big deal. I mean, seriously, I don't think they went 10 minutes without mentioning it. Unfortunately, shortly after Truex took the lead, William Byron spun out. That caused the field to be stacked up for another set of pit stops and another restart. Truex ended up restarting 2nd, and he fell back to 6th on the restart. Brad Keselowski suddenly came out of nowhere and established himself as a potential win threat, and he took the lead. As we got down to 70, 60, 50, 40 laps to go, as laps continued to wind down, you had Keselowski leading with Logano 2nd, you had Denny Hamlin, Kyle Busch, and Martin Truex Jr. all there in the top 5, and it felt like that's about how things were going to finish. And then we had our first kind of dramatic incident of the day. Clint Bowyer, who kind of struggled with the handling on his car, was running around the back half of the top 10 most of the race, got spun by Jimmy Johnson. Jimmy Johnson tried to go between Daniel Suarez and Clint Bowyer, and it didn't work out for Bowyer. Bowyer got looped around. He ended up going a lap down in this after this incident. Really hurt what was otherwise going to be an okay points day. I mean, it was kind of a survival day for Bowyer the way he'd been running, but this hurt him pretty badly. This happened with about 30 laps to go, so then that led us to the final restart of the race. Logano was able to jump out to the lead, but Brad Keselowski was able to hold on to 2nd, and Brad Keselowski, after just a few laps, started to reel in his teammate, and it made me kind of start thinking about some possible team orders. Joey Logano's still in the playoffs. Brad Keselowski, his Penske teammate, not in the playoffs anymore. Logano had the lead, but it looked like Brad Keselowski was trying really hard to pass him, and all I could think about is that if this was Formula 1, Keselowski would have backed off like 20 laps earlier. But no, credit to Brad Keselowski and credit to Roger Penske. No team orders here. They let the 2 guys race it out pretty much as hard as they could. And really, Keselowski wasn't much better than Logano. He couldn't get past the 22 car, and that allowed the 18, the 78, and then later the 11 car to eventually catch up and make it kind of like a 4 or 5 car battle for the last 20 laps. With less than 10 laps to go, Martin Truex Jr. moved into 2nd place, immediately got to the back bumper of the 22 car, and for the last 7 laps or so, they were virtually side by side for the race lead. At Martinsville. Martinsville's a one-groove track, according to everyone, according to experts. But Truex and Logano raced side by side for the better part of 7 laps, with Truex on the bottom and Logano holding him off on the high side, the middle side, 1 lane off the bottom. And they were basically door to door, virtually door to door. No driver was gaining that much of an advantage. Logano would kind of get a little bit of a run off, but Truex would pull right back up alongside him on the as they entered the corner. It was incredible racing. And the best part was, or the most interesting part was, the most surprising part was, is that they were racing this way without very much contact. Remember, both Martin Truex Jr. and Joey Logano are in the playoffs. This is the first race of the round of 8. The winner of this race locks themselves into the Championship 4 race at Homestead. There is a ton riding on this finish. And both these guys, both in the playoffs, kept it clean. They kept it off each other for the most part. That is until the white flag. And now here's where I'll get to talk about the finish of this race, because that's what I'm sure most of you guys clicked on this video to hear about. Coming to the white flag, they were still side by side. As they exited turn number 2, however, with about half a lap to go, Martin Truex Jr. cleared Joey Logano for the race lead. Cleanly finished the pass on the bottom, moved up about a car length in front of him, made the pass. He'd been battling him for about 10 laps. For 7 of them, he'd been side by side, never hit him, never bumped him out of the way. Basically raced him perfectly cleanly. But then heading into turn 3, coming to the checkers, Joey Logano got all up in the back bumper of that 78 car, knocked him out of the way. They drew up side by side and basically wrecked each other coming across the line. Joey Logano won the race by about a half a car length over Hamlin and Truex, because Hamlin was closing in quick out of nowhere, almost won the race. Both cars basically stumbled across the finish line. Logano ended up getting the win. He was able to pass Truex back by making that little bump and run move. But of course, there was a lot of drama afterwards. A lot of people picking sides. Some people hating on Logano for bumping him out of the way. Some people saying, Truex, it's Rubbin's racing is what it is. And this is where the controversy, this is where the discussion kind of comes into play. Martinsville Speedway is no stranger to the bump and run. We see guys bump and run out all the time here. It's a one-groove racetrack. Sometimes that's the only way you can pass a guy. Joey Logano basically said that, he did what he had to do. Bump and run. He didn't wreck the guy. Last year when Denny Hamlin got into the back of Chase Elliott, he straight up wrecked him. And most fans were not okay with that. In this case, Joey Logano did not wreck Truex. He just, pulled off a pretty simple, pretty basic bump and run. Standard. Nothing too serious, too dramatic. Martin Truex Jr., however, was not happy at all because, from his point of view, he raced Joey Logano perfectly clean for 7 laps. He battled with him side by side, didn't hit him, didn't get into him, didn't knock him out of the way, and it took him 7 laps, but he eventually made the pass perfectly cleanly, perfectly fairly, and I think Truex was pretty miffed that Logano just immediately dumped him for the win. He didn't dump him, I'm sorry, that's a strong language. He bumped him out of the way. He nudged him out of the way and basically took the position away. I know everybody's kind of in a rush to name someone the bad guy. A lot of people are looking at Logano as the bad guy. A lot of people are like, Truex deserved it, so on and so forth. I don't really think there's an obvious bad guy in this scenario. I don't want to be like just a fence sitter here and not like take a firm stance, but it's really hard for me to get super upset with either guy. If I had to be on anyone's side, I'd be on Martin Truex Jr.'s side, just because if you look at it from his standpoint, he did race Joey Logano cleanly. Did not bump and run, did not have to do anything like that to make the pass. If he had to work for it, he worked for it the good old-fashioned way. Joey Logano, on the other hand, the moment he got passed by a faster car, he didn't try to work for the position again, he just bumped him out of the way, just used him up. So if you look at Truex, who grinded to get that spot, grinded, worked hard, raced fair, raced clean, gave Logano room, drove with so much respect, and then you look at Logano, who just threw all that out the window and bumped him out of the way, used him as his brakes, I'm gonna side with Truex more than Logano. Do I think Logano was entirely wrong? No. I might have done the same thing in that scenario. I don't know for sure. I've never been in a scenario like that, but I might have. A lot of people probably would. But my problem is with the people saying, Martin Truex Jr. would have done the same thing in that situation. Nope, you are wrong. Martin Truex Jr. was in the exact situation last year in this race. Remember, after all the crazy restarts and the wreck with Chase Elliott, it came down to Martin Truex Jr. on the inside of Kyle Busch for the final 2-lap restart. And instead of wrecking Kyle Busch, instead of running him over, he raced him perfectly cleanly and ended up finishing second. At any point during that 2-lap restart, he could have drifted up even 2 feet out of the bottom lane and put Kyle Busch up out of the groove. But he did not. Instead, he raced him perfectly cleanly, and he settled for a close second-place finish. So for those people saying Truex would have done the same thing, you can't be sure of that, because he literally had a chance to do it last year and he didn't. So I don't think Truex would have done the same thing. So that's why he was upset. I love Martin Truex Jr.'s post-race interview though. It was Mad Truex. If you haven't seen it, go look up the post-race interview with Truex on pit road. Mad Truex is like, I want him to play Batman in the next Batman movie. I'm gonna call him Batman Truex. Bat Martin Truex Jr. That's terrible. No, let's cut this out. No, but Truex was upset. He basically said, Logano won't win the championship. And when asked, what are you gonna do? How are you gonna stop him? Truex bluntly said, I'm gonna win it. So I like that answer. Mad Truex is fun, Truex. He might have won the battle, but he ain't gonna win the war. That was what Martin Truex Jr. said. It's a classic phrase we've heard before, but I think it sums up this situation pretty perfectly. Truex isn't the kind of guy to go take somebody out in retaliation. He's not that kind of guy, and I don't think he's going to. We go to some fast tracks coming up. That wouldn't be safe. Truex is a smarter guy than that. He's not gonna just straight up wreck Joey. But if Joey does anything to ask for it, this is reminiscent of the 2015 situation that Joey Logano found himself with Matt Kenseth. If Logano puts himself in another situation that allows Truex to retaliate in any sort of way, I think Truex will take it. We saw last year, Chase Elliott was able to get retaliation on Denny Hamlin at Phoenix. Maybe Truex is able to work something out down the line as well. I think Truex owes Joey Logano something. If he goes and just like wrecks him straight up, that would be very un-Truex-like, and that would be kind of uncalled for. But if Logano's blocking him heavily at the end of the Homestead race, yeah, Truex is gonna spin him, and I wouldn't blame him. Martin Truex Jr.'s had a rough few weeks in these playoffs. He's kind of been pushed around a lot, and I think kind of like what we saw in 2015 with Matt Kenseth eventually kind of overflowing and erupting and letting it all hang out. I'm afraid we could see that with Truex coming up. Remember at the Roval? I know it was an accident, but Martin Truex Jr. had that race won back, a few weeks ago at the Roval, until Jimmy Johnson came out of control spinning and wrecked into him. So he's already had now 2 races in these playoffs basically stolen from him by the bumper. I don't blame Martin Truex Jr. for being Mad Martin Truex Jr. Ooh, that's better. Mad Martin. Mad Martin at Martinsville. Oh gosh, this is getting too much. I mean, if I got the win taken away from me twice like that, I'd be pretty upset too. Anyway, y'all, those are my thoughts on today's finish. An outstanding finish. I enjoyed every minute of it. Let me know what you guys think down below. Leave a comment. I want to hear what you guys have to say. Before I end the show, I want to look briefly at the playoff standings after one race in the round of 8 because we've got some pretty big gaps here, honestly. Logano has locked himself in, so far I'm 1 for 1 in my playoff Final Four predictions. I thought Logano would get in. I didn't think he'd win this race. I thought Logano would just get in on consistency, but you know, I'll take it however way I can get it. The other 3 spots are occupied by Kyle Busch, Kevin Harvick, and Martin Truex Jr. And you have Kurt Busch, Chase Elliott, Clint Bowyer, and Aric Almirola below the cut line, and you see that 25-point bubble. That's a big, big, big gap. My biggest takeaway from this Martinsville race was the disappointing run from Chase Elliott. You know, this last round was all Chase Elliott all the time. 2 wins in 3 races. You know, he's coming off a win last week at Kansas. He came into Martinsville this week. He was my pick to win, and he really crapped in the bed. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. He came into this race 3 points to the good. He leaves 31 points out. Steve Letarte said something during the race that basically sums up the round of 8 if you are still a round of 8 contender. You know, okay runs aren't good enough. Chase Elliott and Aric Almirola ran around 10th place all race long, and unless you're Kevin Harvick with a huge, huge cushion, you can't do that and move on. That's not going to work. Chase Elliott didn't get any points in stage 1, and I tweeted then that, you know, he needs to take advantage of these stage points. Like, Martinsville was supposed to be his best track in this round. He's good at Texas. He's fine at ISM Raceway, but Martinsville was a race I thought he would be, like, the best at, the biggest contender. And instead, he ran, you know, around 7th at best all day long. That's not good enough. That's an okay run, and that's not good enough in this round. So he didn't get very many stage points. Meanwhile, all these other guys in front of him got tons of stage points because, you know, they're all in the top 5, top 6 all day long. So this is a really bad day if you're a Chase Elliott fan. I mean, I picked him to move on to the round of 4, and a lot of you guys did too. A lot of people think we're high on Chase Elliott because of the momentum he had coming into this round. Like I said, 2 wins in the last 3 races. I mean, that's a guy with a lot of steam behind him. 31 points out. I know we're only 1 race into the round, but he's in a must-win scenario. Unless one of these guys in front of him wrecks, or 2 of these guys in front of him wrecks, unless that happens, he's in a must-win. Honestly, if you're Alan Gustafson and the rest of that 9-car team, you need to look at Texas and ISM as must-win races. And it's really a shame that you came into Martinsville, arguably your best track in this round, 3 points to the good, and you leave 31 points out. And not because you wrecked, not because you had an engine failure or a tire failure or even a penalty. No, you just ran mediocre. And that's really kind of unfortunate. I can talk about some of these other guys. Clint Bowyer got spun by Jimmy Johnson. He was closer to the bubble. That bubble became a lot bigger after the Jimmy Johnson incident, and so, you know, that's rough for Bowyer. I also thought Martinsville was his best race of this round, and he's in a bigger hole than Chase. Honestly, I think all 4 of these guys below the cut line need to look ahead at these next 2 races as must-win. I don't think Kevin Harvick or Martin Truex Jr. are just going to suck for 2 weeks in a row, you know? You're going to need to win a race if you're going to beat one of those guys. Anyway, I can go much more in depth and analyze all these guys' runs at Martinsville. All you really need to know is Aric Almirola and Chase Elliott did not run that well. Clint Bowyer also kind of underwhelmed me. Meanwhile, Kyle Busch looks still like a top championship contender. Kevin Harvick, we could talk about him for a while. He was confusing. Martin Truex Jr. looked great, and, you know, obviously, who's there in 5th? Kurt Busch. I forgot about him. Yeah, he was 5th to 8th place. Actually better than I thought he'd be at Martinsville. I thought he'd run worse than that this week, so I'll give him credit for that. He's still 25 points out, which is a lot, but he could have been a lot worse. Could have been a lot worse for him, so there you have it. That's all I got for today's show. Thank you so much for watching. You can follow me on Twitter, you can follow me on Instagram, or you can sponsor the show on Patreon like Michael Harrison, Tice Moore, and Cameron James, and the rest of our amazing Patreon supporters. If you too want to support me directly and help fund the show, you can check out that top link down below. I greatly appreciate y'all taking the time to check that out. Did I mention there's a mini audio podcast series that goes along with being a Patreon supporter? You get access to those as well. So if you're interested in that, maybe check out that top link down below. But thank you all so much for watching. It was an amazing race today. Like I said, another all-time classic finish. This season's just been full of them. We're getting spoiled, boys and girls. This is getting wild. I mean, I know we're going to Texas next week, and that track isn't always the most thrilling, but all bets are off at this point. I mean, Chicagoland was an incredible finish this year. I mean, it's been great. It's been great to be a fan. It's been fun to make these episodes. I hope you guys have enjoyed watching. I'll see you guys again in just a couple days. I'll do another Out of the Groove talking about news. Also, Jimmy Johnson got a new sponsor today. We should have mentioned that more at the top of the show, but I'll make a video in a couple of days talking more about that. Big news for NASCAR. Good things around the corner everywhere you look. Good day for the NASCAR and all racing fans that support it, in my opinion. Great day. Had a fun time. Hope you guys enjoyed watching. See you guys soon.